Stewart-Haas Racing will shut down and close at the end of 2024, and Junior Motorsports will likely not be joining the Cup Series in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got to NASCAR and other motorsports story discusser today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. First, going to talk about a ton of paint schemes that we've seen over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brennan Poole's 2024 frontline scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Portland. This scheme looks really solid in my opinion. Love the colors on it. Alpha Prime Racing does an amazing job on their paint schemes. This one looks really good in my honest opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Preece's 2024 Overstock scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Gateway. This scheme looks alright in my opinion, very similar to Noah Gregson's. It looks alright. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Gateway. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Shane Van Gisbergen's updated 2024 Quad Lock scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Portland. Colors look really great in my opinion. Love the colors of it overall. Kyle Sachs always knocks it out of the park. This looks amazing. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack once again at Portland. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Cole Custer's 2024 Autodesk scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Portland. Like the colors of it. Very simple. Love the gray. Looks really solid and good in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s 2024 Oiki scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Gateway. I like the scheme, to be honest. Colors look pretty solid, and there's some really good logo placement as well, as the letters are absolutely huge. Look solid. Looking forward to seeing the racetrack at Gateway. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Ellis's 2024 Classic Collision scheme that we'll see this weekend at Portland. This is updated from some other Classic Collision schemes. I think this looks solid, looks pretty good. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at Portland. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chase Briscoe's 2024 Overstock scheme that we'll see this weekend at Gateway. There's going to be 3 Overstock schemes on the racetrack. The only one driver that will not have an Overstock scheme is Noah Gragson, who will have Serve Pro. This scheme, very similar to Ryan Preece, not much to say. Good to see Overstock, though, that they will be sponsoring Chase Briscoe and 3 other SHR drivers this weekend. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the New Hampshire Cup race as they have a title sponsor for the event. It's going to be called the USA Today 301. I think it's the first time that we've seen a newspaper company sponsor a race in a long time, if I'm not mistaken. So really excited to see that USA Today is going to be sponsoring. Obviously, when you win the race, you end up getting a lobster. Really exciting stuff and pretty cool to see that USA Today will be sponsoring the Cup race at New Hampshire. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joseph Newgarden. As it was confirmed by Adam Stern and many reporters in the industry that Joseph Newgarden won $4.288 million in this year's Indianapolis 500, which is up from $3.666 million in 2023. That's an increase by I think about 15 to 20% if I'm not mistaken, which is a massive and huge increase for this year's Indy 500. Obviously, it was the largest purse in Indy 500 history. Congratulations to Joseph Newgarden on winning a ton of money for this year's Indy 500. It's a pretty excellent and really great accomplishment for Joseph Newgarden. Congratulations to him on winning that amount of money. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dale Jr. As it was announced earlier today that with Dale Jr. reaching 1 million followers on Instagram, he announced that he'll be donating $1 million to the 10 largest cities that follow him across the country. This is a really, really good cause that Dale Jr. is doing. Like I said, he did reach 1 million followers on Instagram. It's a really, really huge deal that Dale Jr. is going to be doing this. I love that he's going to be donating a lot of money to charities and a lot of hospitals across the globe and now across the United States, I should say. It's really exciting to see this. Really glad also to see that Dale Jr. is donating a ton of money. I think it's this really great and a really amazing cause overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. As it was confirmed by Joseph Strigley and Trackhouse Racing themselves that Shane Van Gisbergen is the first driver in NASCAR Cup Series history to lead in 4 of his first 5 Cup Series starts. Of course, he led at the Chicago Street Course when he went to Victory Lane. He also led at the Indianapolis Road Course during green flag pit stops. He led at Talladega for a little bit. He also led, unfortunately did not leave his Circuit Americas, but he also led during the green flag pit stops at the Coca-Cola 600 as well. Shane Van Gisbergen continues to make some really incredible stats, and it's pretty awesome to see that he continues to make history in this sport. I don't think anyone's ever led 5 of the first 6, and of course he'll be running at the Chicago Street Course in about a month or so, and also will be spotting for Will Brown, who we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. Once again, congratulations, SVG, on accomplishing another big feat. It's a pretty huge and awesome deal. Congratulations to SVG on being the first driver to lead in 4 of his first 5 Cup Series starts. Really awesome stuff, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the 2025 Indianapolis 500, as the logo has been officially revealed for next year's Indy 500. I think his logo looks really solid, in my opinion, a different color. Usually they kind of have like a brownish, reddish color for these Indy 500s over the last years, but they're changing it up to be a little bit more of a greenish looking color. I think it looks really solid, in my opinion. Not as good as legendary Indy 500 logos, but I like they're changing a little bit. Instead of having like a brownish color, they're doing a greenish color this time around. I think it does look really, really solid. It does look pretty good, and I can't wait for the Indy 500 next year. This year's Indy 500, despite the rain delay, was still a very fun and exciting Indy 500 to watch. Pretty cool to see that the logo has been revealed. I think, again, it does look pretty solid overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Preston Pardus. As it was announced earlier today that Preston Pardus will be driving to 36 for DGM Racing this weekend at Portland. Preston Pardus made select starts for organizations like DGM Racing and also for his own organization known as Pardus Racing. He's also going to be running at Sonoma Raceway next weekend, I believe, with his own organization of Pardus, and now he'll get the chance to drive for DGM this weekend. I think that Preston Pardus has a decent chance and opportunity. We've seen how fast DGM Racing has been, especially on the road course program. I think he'll have a chance for top 20. I think this car is in a really decent position. If Motorsports are not mistaken, though I do think they have to make their way into the field because there's 39 cars going to be entering this weekend. So we'll see what Preston Pardus can do. But I do expect that Preston Pardus will have a really solid chance and opportunity to be competitive. Glad to see he'll get the chance and opportunity to drive with DGM Racing this weekend because I think he'll have a good chance and opportunity to be extremely competitive this weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Vicente Salas. As it was announced earlier this evening that Vicente Salas will be driving the 91 for McAnally Hilgeman Racing this weekend at Gateway. Vicente made his Truck Series debut, I believe, at Circuit Americas early in the season, and now he'll get the chance once again to make another start with McAnally Hilgeman, which is an amazing and great opportunity. Vicente, I believe, is driven in the Coke Pro Series, and I think he's won some races in that series. He's been a veteran of iRacing, and now gets a chance to drive for one of the top-tier organizations. This is a truck that's been competing for wins with Zane Smith, and Jack Wood has done a solid job so far this year with the team and organization. I expect Vicente to have a solid performance, and I'm glad to see he gets a chance and opportunity to work with McAnally Hilgeman this season. I think he's going to be very, very competitive. I think he's going to have a good chance and opportunity. And once again, congratulations to Vicente on getting a chance and opportunity to run with the team. I think he'll do a very solid and good job, and I think he will be very competitive this weekend at Gateway, with a lot of drivers also will be running that are a lot younger this weekend at Gateway, also known as Worldwide Technology Raceway. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Iowa Speedway. Now, earlier today, Kyle Larson, Brad Keselowski, and Christopher Bell were at the test at Iowa Speedway to determine what tire they were going to be using. And if you actually take a look at a lot of the photos that have surfaced around Iowa Speedway, you probably saw that they have repaved the bottom 2 lanes in turns 1 and 2, and also in turns 3 and 4. Personally, I'm not a big fan of them repaving it. I get that the bottom lanes have gotten really, really bumpy, and that's a big reason why they've gone ahead and done this. But at the same token, in same time, I'm just personally not a fan of repaving only the bottom 2 lanes and now repaving the top 2 lanes. Denny Hamlin basically compared it to a bunch of grip strips that are at Pocono Raceway. It's unfortunately, in my opinion, I think it's going to turn into a really dominant bottom lane. And I think that the top lane is not going to be dominant. Where I know that the short track package in NASCAR currently is not very good. And I expect that they're probably going to bring a really hard tire that when we go to Iowa in a few weeks, which is really, really unfortunate. But I am still excited for the weekend because I think the Xfinity Series is probably going to put on a really solid product. But I think that the Cup race is just not going to be that great, honestly. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that Grip Strip can lead to opportunities of multiple grooves being available. Hopefully they can provide some sort of resin compound on the track to make the racing better. But personally, I don't think it's going to create that opportunity. We'll find out what tire they're going to be using. They're supposed to have a wheel force test for the next couple days, and in the next week or so, supposed to have a wheel force test. I don't know who's going to be doing the test at this point, but they will be having a test not too far down the road, and it's interesting that they've gone ahead and repaved the bottom 2 lanes at Iowa Speedway. I don't agree with it. I'm not a big fan of the move, and I personally don't think they should have done it, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Cody Ware. As it was confirmed earlier today that Cody Ware will be driving to 15 for Rick Ware Racing this weekend at Gateway. This will be Cody Ware's second of multiple scheduled starts. I think he's got 5 starts that are scheduled this year in 2024. He made his return to Talladega Superspeedway after being indefinitely suspended for basically over a year. He was returning to the sport. We all expect he was going to make select starts. He ran at Talladega and was a little bit off the pace, so I think he did end up being in the lead pack for a majority of the event. Personally, I'm not a big fan of Cody Ware. Obviously, there's innocent until proven guilty in the situation that sadly ended up taking place. But Cody Ware, I don't think that if you're in Rick Ware's situation, you want to make your team a lot better, which we've seen that with Justin Haley and Kaz Grall this season. I just don't think you want to bring someone like him in. I think Haley Deegan would have been a better option for this weekend, though she is going to be in Portland, so probably not. Matt Mendel was not an option this week because he's going to be in Portland as well. So really we're very limited on options. But you could have gotten someone like a Ben Rose. You could have gotten Kaz Grall to drive in the seat this weekend. Instead, they chose Cody Ware. I get that Cody is the son. I get that and understand it and respect that. But at the same time, I'm just not a big fan of putting Cody Ware behind the wheel because Cody is really not going to do much this weekend. No disrespect. I don't expect a lot of great performances, and I don't think he's going to run very, very well, unfortunately. I think he's going to struggle and likely finish in the back of the pack, while Justin Haley more than likely is going to perform pretty solidly and probably be running around the top 20 throughout the weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Luke Fenhaus. As it was announced earlier today that Luke Fenhaus will be making his Truck Series debut this weekend at Worldwide Technology Raceway, driving to 66 for ThorSport Racing. It's been expected that Luke was going to make select starts at ThorSport Racing this season, and this is a really good track to get your chance and opportunity. A lot of the great drivers in the sport have gotten the chance to make their debut at Gateway. Also, we know that Andres Perez is making his debut this weekend as well. I think Luke is a very talented driver. He's driven and made select ARCA starts with teams like Pinnacle Racing Group, and also I think has won a couple races with Pinnacle as well and ARCA, if I'm not mistaken. I think that Luke is going to have a solid chance and opportunity to go out there and maybe got to get a chance at winning. ThorSport has shown some really good speed in recent years at this track, and I do think that Luke Fenhaus is going to have a very solid and good run with this organization. I don't remember the rest schedule that he's got. I think Milwaukee could be on a schedule if I'm not mistaken, but I do expect that Luke is going to do a very solid and really great job with ThorSport Racing this weekend. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm glad to see Luke Fenhaus will have a great chance and opportunity to make his debut. I think he's going to do a very solid and great job. Congratulations to him on getting the chance and opportunity to drive with ThorSport Racing this weekend and make his debut this weekend with the organization. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Colby Howard. As it was announced earlier today that Colby Howard will be driving to 1 for Tricon Garage this weekend at Gateway. Colby Howard has made 2 starts so far with Tricon Garage. His first start coming at Atlanta Motor Speedway early this year, where unfortunately he got crashed out, I think, early in the race. And then he also made a start at Darlington Raceway, where he actually had a really good truck. It ran in the top 5 and top 10 a majority of the race. I think that Colby Howard is going to have a solid run this weekend. That one truck has been very solid. It's been competing for wins throughout the year. Brendan Queen nearly won with this truck a couple weekends ago in North Wilkesboro. Brett Moffitt had a decent performance, had a top 10 truck a couple weekends ago at Charlotte Motor Speedway, but didn't really have a chance and opportunity to go out there and get the victory done. I think that Colby Howard, though, is a very talented driver, and while I don't think he's going to go out there and compete for the win by any stretch of imagination, I still think he's going to have a very solid performance, and I think he's going to do a really good job this weekend. My prediction, I think Colby Howard at least gets the top 10 this weekend with Tricon, because I think that Colby Howard can absolutely get the best out of the equipment. I'm looking forward to seeing him get back behind the wheel, because I think he will have a very solid and good performance. Good luck to him. I don't know how many more races he has scheduled with the team this year, but like I said, I'm glad to see he'll get the chance and opportunity to drive for Tricon Garage at Gateway. I think he's going to do a really solid job this weekend with the organization. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joe Williams. As it was announced earlier this evening that Joe Williams has officially parted ways with AM Racing and will not be returning to the organization going forward as a crew chief starting this weekend at Portland Raceway. The replacement crew chief going forward is going to be Matt Lucas, who's been the competition director at AM Racing. He will start being the crew chief for Haley Deegan going forward. Joe Williams has been the crew chief of the 07 SS Greenlight Racing Group for the last 2 or 3 years, and in fact was with Haley Deegan throughout the start of the season. AM Racing's been looking to make some major shakeups over there because there's been a lot of struggles so far this year with the AM Racing Group. And I think a lot of people are instantly going to blame Haley Deegan and not Joe Williams, and I can kind of understand why. Joe Williams was a crew chief over there a couple years ago, and Haley Deegan actually had a lot of great performances with that team in her debut, finishing in 13th. But it's been a really big struggle with AM Racing so far this season. Haley Deegan so far hasn't even scored a top 10 finish yet, and we saw Brett Moffitt score around 7 or 8 top 10s, I believe, last year. But we do have to remember that Brett Moffitt is a much better driver than Haley Deegan, and she also is a rookie compared to Brett Moffitt, who is a veteran. Also, Cole Custer got a lot of help from SHR when he drove behind the wheel of the 07 car. They need to do something over there to make more improvement, because let's be real and honest, Haley Deegan has struggled a lot, but it's kind of funny because she did get a top 20 with Joe Williams, so I feel like the chemistry was starting to build. Hopefully, we can start to see her doing great. She's been very hit or miss at road courses, but also I'm a little worried about her this weekend just because the last time we ran a race, I think she's not a bad road racer, but unfortunately, the performance just was not there, and it's been a big struggle for her this season, and a lot of that, unfortunately, is kind of on her, sadly, a little bit, though I will say that AM Racing is not one of those top-tier organizations. We'll see how she ends up doing. Personally, I don't think she's going to have a great performance this weekend, but there's some good tracks coming up with her. I think the intermediate program has been very solid this year. Hopefully, we can see that program turn the corner and turn it around, because right now the performance has not been there at the moment. Hopefully, we can start seeing the performance get a little better for Haley Deegan in AM Racing going forward, but unfortunately, I'm a little worried that it's not going to be the case, sadly. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Andretti Global. As it was reported by multiple publications out there about Andretti Global, that Mohammed bin Sulayem, who is the president of the FIA, is now saying that Andretti needs to go buy another team if they want to join Formula One. Confirming that the FIA is now basically kind of saying and denying Andretti away into Formula One. We know that the FOM had originally denied Andretti into getting into Formula One. Christian Horner is basically also said the same thing, who's of course running a competition over at Red Bull at the moment. He's basically saying the same thing as well. I do not agree with Mohammed bin Sulayem. Now, obviously, a lot of that was from the Haas publications, but obviously Haas is not going to be getting out of F1 anytime soon, and they're wanting Alpine and Haas to be the team to get out of the way for Andretti to come in. I do not understand why these teams in Formula One are trying to deny Andretti from getting in. Andretti would bring a lot more to the Formula One grid than a lot of these organizations currently at the moment, including Haas, including Alpine. They're not bringing any value to the grid at this particular moment. Well, Alpine at least is bringing a little bit of value with the engines that they're bringing in, but they're not bringing a lot of value when it comes to performance. So I really don't understand why they're trying to deny Andretti from getting into F1 at the moment. They deserve to be there. Andretti's put the work into it. They want to be there. They want to open up a Formula 2 and Formula 3 program for American drivers to get in. All they give a crap about is American dollars. They do not care about the fans in the U.S. It's been clear as day. They don't care about us. They don't care about us. They really don't. And it's really frustrating, and it sucks to see. But again, am I shocked about it? To be honest with you, no. I'm really not surprised about this. This doesn't shock me, and it doesn't really surprise me overall. I wish it wasn't the case, but like I said, I am sadly not shocked or surprised to see this being the case as someone who's been watching motorsports for a while, and that's one of the reasons why I've not been watching F1 that much this year. I know the competition's gotten better, but it really wasn't much competition this weekend when you've only had 4 overtakes at Monaco. Unfortunately, it sucks to see, but I'm not surprised to see that they're trying to deny it at this point, considering they've been trying to deny this for a while, then Andretti getting into F1. And now we're going to ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. As it was officially confirmed that Kyle Larson is the 2024 Indianapolis 500 Rookie of the Year. Now, this caused a lot of controversy because a lot of people feel like in IndyCar that Christian Rasmussen should have won the Indy 500 Rookie of the Year honors. And I completely understand why they're saying that, because Christian Rasmussen was the highest finishing rookie driver in this year's Indianapolis 500. But you do have to look at the full criteria. And this is why Jimmy Johnson won it back in 2022, despite Dave Malukas being the highest finishing rookie 2 years ago. And this is also why Fernando Alonso won the Rookie of the Year honors, despite Ed Jones finishing third in the Indy 500. It's not just based off your performance in the race. It's based off the performance throughout the whole entire month. And if you look at the whole entire month, Kyle Larson was the best running rookie the whole entire month. He was fast from the get-go, going back to April. He was fast in every session for the most part. He had the fastest qualifying speed for an Indy 500, I believe, ever for a rookie. He had the highest starting spot, I believe, for a rookie ever in 5th position. Kyle Larson, and was great with the media nonetheless. Kyle Larson also brought a major impact to the Indy 500. That's why he was able to win this year's Rookie of the Year honors. I get why people are upset about this. Believe me, I kind of understand it because Christian Rasmussen, to a lot of people, probably got robbed. And even Rinus VeeKay agrees that they feel like that he got robbed. But personally, in my opinion, I think Kyle Larson deserves it. Everything that he did for the sport this month, he 100% deserves getting the Indy 500 Rookie of the Year honors. I get and I feel bad for Christian Rasmussen. I guess they could change up the rules a little bit, but personally, in my honest opinion, I do not believe that Christian was robbed in this case. Again, I understand why people feel like it, and I understand it, but at the same token, same time, Kyle Larson did a lot for the sport this month of growing IndyCar, and that's why Kyle Larson was able to win this year's Indy 500 Rookie of the Year honors, because everything he did, and he performed a lot better than Christian Rasmussen as he got better as the race progressed. Yes, Christian started in the middle of the pack and got up to the front pretty quickly, but I think Kyle Larson, with everything he did for the sport this month, he absolutely deserved the Rookie of the Year honors, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Indy 500 TV ratings. As it was reported by Adam Stern and NBC Sports that NBC and Peacock got 5.344 million viewers for this year's Indy 500. That is up 8% from 4.93 million last year. This is despite the fact that there was a rain delay that took place for 3 or 4 hours and the fact that a lot of people were not tuning in at the time. There are a couple pretty big factors for this year's Indy 500 being up 8% from last year. One of the big reasons, of course, is Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson, of course, attempted to run this year's Indy 500 and was able to make the Indianapolis 500 this year. But there's another big reason why the Indy 500 ratings were up. For the first time in a few years, they actually lifted the blackout. The reason it lifted the blackout for Indianapolis, because they've been doing this blackout for many, many years, is because, one, they sold out the crowd for this year's Indianapolis 500, but also because a lot of people were not going to be able to see it because of the weather. And there's actually another big factor to why I think the ratings could have even been higher than what they actually were. So I think it peaked at 6.5 million viewers. There were huge storms that were affecting the Midwest. I think that Chicago got affected by it. I know the St. Louis area affected. I live in the area. It was affected by weather this past weekend. So the ratings could have even been higher for this year's Indy 500 if the weather had not come into play as big as it did across the St. Louis metro in other areas. Still, though, I think it's a big win for IndyCar, unfortunately, they really didn't do a lot of good promotion, and that is really sad to see, because if they'd done a lot of good promotion, I think we could have been in a much better position. Still, though, it's really good to see the ratings be up. I think they'll be up next year, too, if we see more drivers attempt the double, if the waivers, of course, are approved for Kyle Larson, which we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. But I am really happy to see the Indy 500 TV ratings up, because personally, I think that it's really good to see the ratings up for this year's Indianapolis 500. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about NASCAR's call at the end of this year's Coca-Cola 600. There's been a lot of talk about this. So NASCAR made the call to end the Coca-Cola 600 after lap 249 of 400 laps. A lot of people, including myself, were really ticked off and frustrated with NASCAR. Now, a lot of people, like myself, saw some posts, and originally I had said on here that I think the NASCAR had done everything in their power to try to get the full Coca-Cola 600 in. They waited 2 hours to get it back going. But then I saw a post from Austin Kanensky from Motorsports Wire and USA Today. Basically, Joe Gibbs was told 15 minutes prior, that before they made the call, that they were actually planning to get back on the racetrack around 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Then Fox came on the air and said, we're done with the race. There were a lot of drivers and people that were very confused because fans were allowed back into the track. Now, Elton Sawyer spoke on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio earlier today, and he basically said that they did everything in their power, and he said that Fox did not play a major role in getting this race called. Denny Hamlin completely disagreed, because he says that he was dry about 15 minutes after they called it, and he said we could have gotten it back going. He said, oh crap, they're shutting their jet dryers down. Does this mean they're not going to basically get it back going? I personally call BS on what Elton Sawyer said. I actually think Fox played a major role into this race being called early. We have seen TV play a major role in these races being called, or some of the decisions on the schedule. For example, look at what happened a few years ago with them adding Bristol Dirt. You know who asked for Bristol Dirt to be added? You guessed it, Fox asked for it to be added. The LA Coliseum, guess who played a role in that? You guessed it, Fox. I think because of the fact they know they're not going to have the Coca-Cola 600 next year, they really asked for it to be called early. And I'm not happy about it. And I think that NASCAR knows it too, why the fans are upset. And the fans have absolutely every right to be upset with this situation. Because I think NASCAR should have not made the call. They should have continued going. They could have gotten all 400 laps in. They should have ran the whole entire race. Instead, they made an ass out of themselves and made a terrible decision. And I think NASCAR really screwed the poocher and really messed it up. I think they screwed up completely here. And in my personal opinion, they should have gotten the race going. I'm going to call BS on NASCAR's end, because personally, I think NASCAR really screwed the pooch and really screwed up decisions. Again, NASCAR will not take responsibility. I think that Fox really played a role in this, and I think they're more at fault for the situation, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Will Brown. As it was officially confirmed from Richard Childress Racing earlier this evening that Will Brown will make his NASCAR Cup Series debut this weekend at Sonoma Raceway, driving a 33 car for Richard Childress Racing. He will have Mobile X, Motorola, and a bunch of Australian companies working with him as well. Shane Van Gisbergen is going to be spotting for Will Brown in his Cup Series debut, and I believe Brett Griffin is also going to be spotting for him as well, as there will be multiple spotters working with him throughout the event. Will Brown currently competes for AAA Engineering, which has Red Bull ties and association, and this has been expected. We actually did a video talking about this about a month ago or a couple weeks ago when it was officially announced by multiple other publications, but now it's been officially confirmed from RCR. We have been seeing a lot of drivers from the Supercar Series coming over in recent years, and the reason we've been seeing it is because of how successful Shane Van Gisbergen was in his debut. We also know that Cam Waters, he's making his NASCAR Cup Series debut in a couple weeks at Sonoma Raceway, driving a 60 for RFK with the Sage 60 program, and also potentially could be driving a Chicago Street Course as well. We also know that Brody Kosecki was most likely the original driver of the C, but there was a major falling out between Brody Kosecki and the owner of Mobile X, Peter Adelton. What's kind of crazy is Erebus Racing is behind this deal. and AAA Engineering and Airbus have a major alliance. So we do know that Peter Adelton is in major talks to try to buy Airbus Racing at this moment. Will Brown is in a very competitive car. RCR's road course program, at least when Kyle Busch has been driving for it, has been extremely fast and very, very competitive. And I believe that Will Brown is going to have a really strong chance and a great opportunity to go and win the race at Sonoma Raceway. I think he's a very talented driver and always gets the best out of equipment. So I think he's going to do an excellent job, and I think he'll have a great chance and opportunity. I don't know if he's going to win the race, but I think a top 10 is very, very possible. And having SVG up there working with him, I think is going to help in a massive, in a major, major way. So I'm really happy about this. I'm glad to see that we're going to see Will Brown make his NASCAR Cup Series debut. I think he's going to overall do a very excellent job. And like I said, I'm just happy overall to see that Will Brown will get the opportunity and chance to make his NASCAR Cup Series debut. Like I said, I think he's going to do a very excellent and a really good job in his debut with RCR. And I'm glad to see that this supercar invasion is continuing, because I think the supercar invasion is really going to grow the sport, not just in the U.S., but outside of the U.S., in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the waiver debate. Now, if you've been on social media over the course of the last couple days, you have seen the waiver debate on whether Kyle Larson should receive a waiver from NASCAR or not. Now, there's some facts that do need to be noted. According to what Elton Sawyer has said, they have said that Kyle Larson and his team have currently not sent out a waiver yet to get one. The reason that the team have sent a waiver is because Kyle Larson, unfortunately, did not get to run a lap in this year's Coca-Cola 600. And there's been a debate surrounding whether Kyle Larson should get a waiver or not, because a lot of people feel like that Kyle Larson intentionally missed the Coca-Cola 600 to run this year's Indianapolis 500. But that is completely factually inaccurate. Kyle Larson had every intention to run both races. The reason that Kyle Larson missed the Coca-Cola 600 in the first place was because of the fact that the Indy 500 got rained out for 4 hours. And then eventually they got going, and by the time the race started, Kyle Larson was not going to be able to start the Coke 600. But as soon as the Indy 500 concluded, Kyle Larson had flown his plane in to race in the Coca-Cola 600. And then it started raining, and they had lightning, and then NASCAR called it early. I've seen a lot of what the journalists and people have been saying, which, by the way, a lot of the people that have been saying that Kyle Larson shouldn't get a waiver were literally defending NASCAR's decision to call early. Kind of makes you wonder a little bit where people are being paid at this particular point. If you want my honest opinion, Kyle Larson should no doubt be getting a waiver here. And it's really mind-boggling to me that people don't think he deserves a waiver. If Kyle Larson was running a race at like Cherokee Speedway or a track outside of Charlotte, that's a different story. But he was running in one of the biggest events in the world, the Indy 500. I've seen people calling it a side hustle, which is incredibly disrespectful to the prestige of the Indy 500. No disrespect to the Coke 600, because the Coke 600 is a fantastic race, but the Indy 500 is the biggest race in the world. And if you got a chance and opportunity to win the Indy 500, I'm sorry, I'm running the Indy 500 over Coca-Cola 600. And not to mention, when we talk about waivers, so many drivers have gotten waivers. Looking at Chase Elliott, who got a waiver after being suspended for intentionally wrecking Denny Hamlin. Johnny Sauter, 2019, intentionally wrecked Austin Hill, who could also be facing a suspension. He basically got a waiver for intentionally wrecking Austin Hill. Matt Kenseth got a waiver for not starting the first 4 races. So you're telling me that we're going to hand all those drivers out waivers and also medical waivers, which I'm not really going to justify that kind of situation, why people are criticizing that. But you're telling me that we're going to give him not a waiver, despite the fact that Kyle Larson had every intention to run this year's both races. It is not Kyle Larson's fault that the weather played a role in that. And if you think that Kyle Larson had intended to miss the Coke 600 intentionally, I'm sorry, you're wrong here. I do think he's going to get a waiver. The fact that there's even discussion that he shouldn't get a waiver, NASCAR has already pissed off a lot of fans. Not to mention, had Larson actually gotten behind the wheel of the car, he would have completed laps, and this wouldn't have been discussion. The other thing that they could have easily done is just get rid of the playoff format altogether. Therefore, you wouldn't even have a discussion in the first place. Unfortunately, we have to have a discussion about this because Larson didn't get to run a lap in the Coke 600, which, by the way, Justin Allgaier, I want to say, give him a shout out, did a great job substituting for Larson, finishing 13th. Had Larson ran, he probably would have won the race, but he wouldn't have scored any points. Larson sacrificed to run the Indy 500. If he doesn't get a waiver, it's a bad look for the sport, in my opinion. They better give Kyle Larson a waiver because they've given waivers to other people for stupid reasons. They better give Kyle Larson a waiver because it will be a bad look for the sport if they don't give him one. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Dale Jr. Now, we're going to talk about Stewart-Haas Racing and them closing down at the end of this year. But one team that many people theorize as a potential buyer of one of Stewart-Haas Racing's charters is Junior Motorsports. Well, Bob Pockrass clarified earlier this evening in a post that Dale Jr. is not among the people that is looking to buy a charter from Stewart-Haas Racing, which kind of confirms at this moment that Dale Jr. more than likely will not be bringing Junior Motorsports up to the Cup Series at least for 2025. We've been talking about Junior Motorsports as a potential possibility to jump up the Cup Series since only back in 2021 when Josh Berry won his first career NASCAR Xfinity Series race in Martinsville, and people started talking to Dale Jr. and asking him, are you eventually going to move your team up to the Cup Series? At the time, Dale Jr. said that they were moving up at the time. And as the charter prices have continued to skyrocket to the levels they've gone up to in recent years, Dale Jr. has kind of been teasing it a little bit, and recently speaking on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio, he had some intentions of maybe investing in a charter, but not bringing Junior Motorsports up completely at this point. You do need to look at the charter prices right now. They are expected to drop with Stewart-Haas Racing selling at the end of this year, but Dale Jr. was not going to buy a charter from SHR. Now, could Dale Jr. potentially invest in an organization like JTG Doherty Racing? That is certainly a possibility. We know there's a lot of rumors that JTG is looking for an investor, and Dale Jr.'s name has been brought up quite a bit. But there's been this theory going around for a very, very long time also that Dale Jr. was looking to buy a charter from Stewart-Haas Racing, and he was going to buy into SHR and bring it in there. And I thought for the longest time, no, that is not going to happen more than likely. Now, there still is a chance it could happen, and I could see it happening going forward. But as of right now, I'm starting to think it's more than likely not going to happen. And trust me, I want Junior Motorsports up in the Cup Series as much as the next person. But you do have to look at the bigger picture. If Dale Jr. is not going to spend around $2 or $3 million for a charter back in 2018, which he kind of regressed on making a decision then to pull the trigger and go Cup racing, he's not going to do it when it's going to be a little more expensive, right? When it's $20, $30 million. Now, I think he's been a little less gun-shy about this because basically he's kind of still teased it at points. But again, I want to see happen. Now, if Dale Jr. changed his mind and does decide to move up to Cup, I look at drivers like Sam Mayer and Sammy Smith and even Brandon Jones and Justin Allgaier. All the drivers could be possible candidates. I even look at Connor Zilisch as a possible candidate as well. Sam Mayer brings a little sponsorship funding to the table, and I think he's ready to move up to the Cup Series next year. Sammy Smith, I don't think he's ready to move up the Cup, but he's got the Pie Flying J sponsorship, which I think would play a major role in aspect of him making the move up next year. You've also, of course, got Justin Allgaier, who's been in Cup before. Like I mentioned with the Kyle Larson stuff, he did it very, very well substituting for Kyle Larson, finishing 13th. And then, of course, Brandon Jones has the Menards backing, but I think there's a really great chance and possibility that he will not move up. I could also see a driver like Kyle Weatherman and even Roger Carifto. I do think Roger could be in the running for Hendrick Xfinity car next year, or maybe Junior Motorsports Xfinity Series team. We all thought that he was potentially going to go to Junior Motorsports in Xfinity this year. That, of course, did not end up happening. I do think there's a slight chance it could happen maybe in the future, maybe 2026. But again, these charter prices, once the charter agreement does officially get finalized, which again, we're expecting that there's a proposal that's going to be coming out sometime this week, which could mean that the charters might get finalized in the coming weeks. Those charter prices are going to drop. And then we know some other teams have been looking to move up. We know some teams that are not moving. Kaulig is planning not to sell at this point. But going back to Junior Motorsports, as of right now, I don't think they're selling. They're not looking to expand the Cup at the moment, which again, I think is unfortunate because I want to see Junior Motorsports make the jump. I know I said it a lot of times on this channel. I want to see Junior Motorsports get a charter. But as of right now, they're not running for an SHR charter. And outside of that, I don't know if any other teams are selling at this point. I don't think College Racing's selling a charter. I think they're going to keep 2 cars. I wouldn't be surprised if Shane Van Gisbergen is full-time in the 16 next year. It's going to be very interesting to see how things play out there. But as of right now, I'm with a lot of people here at this point. I'm starting to believe that Junior Motorsports is not moving up to Cup right now in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Stewart-Haas Racing. I did a breaking news video earlier today on this situation, but it was unfortunately and sadly confirmed earlier today that Stewart-Haas Racing will in fact be shutting down at the end of the 2024 season. Tony and Gene released a statement earlier today on all the social medias thanking everybody for all the support that Stewart-Haas Racing has had over the many, many years. Stewart-Haas Racing, I believe, has won 70 races all across the board in all 3 series. They've won races in the Truck Series with Cole Custer. They've won Xfinity Series Championship last year with Cole Custer. And you think about all the success that Stewart-Haas Racing had from the get-go. When they basically became Stewart-Haas back in 2009, they became successful from the get-go. They were able to go out and win races instantly, won the All-Star race that year, won at Pocono, won at Chicago in that year. And they made the playoffs and had out in Daytona as well. And also won at Watkins Glen and had a really good chance and opportunity to win the championship that season. 2010 was a little bit of a downhill year for that organization, but 2011, Tony Stewart went on to win the championship, and Ryan Newman made the playoffs that season. Tony went on to win 5 races and beat a hard-charging Carl Lewis at the end of the year. 2012 and 2013 were down years, but 2014 got great, and they won their second and final championship. Then they switched to Ford in 2017, and from the start, they were very, very competitive in 2017. Unfortunately, things started spiraling out of control for SHR a few years ago. It all started when Kurt Busch left the team at the end of 2018. Then Tony Stewart was really pushing to get Kyle Larson and even Kyle Busch. Ford denied Kyle Larson. If I'm not mistaken, I think they denied Kyle Busch as well. And I think that's where the snowball effect really started for Stewart-Haas Racing's downfall. When all the rumors began circulating about SHR potentially all the moves, we all just originally thought they were going to switch manufacturers like Chevrolet. Then we started hearing they were going to sell maybe 1 charter at the end of this year. Then it became 2 charters. Then we started hearing they were going to start selling buildings. And then eventually we got to the point we are at now where Stewart-Haas Racing is going to be shutting down at the end of this year. It is very unfortunate to see this because I grew up being a Stewart-Haas Racing fan. Tony Stewart was my favorite driver growing up in this series. And we saw a lot of great drivers in the drive for this team. Kevin Harvick, Kurt Busch, Clint Bowyer, Chase Briscoe, Noah Gragson, Ryan Preece, all the great drivers, and Ryan Newman, even Danica, though I don't really count Danica as a great driver at this team. These were drivers that were successful at Stewart-Haas Racing. And to see that this actually is happening is very, very sad. Gene has lost interest in wanting to run the team, and he's more focused on his Formula One program. Tony's lost interest in NASCAR and is focused on NHRA. That, unfortunately, is the reason why this is sadly happening. And for me, as someone who grew up, like I said, being an SHR fan, this is a really sad and unfortunate day for the sport as a whole, in my opinion. I'm just really, really sad about this news. But now we begin speculating where the charter is going to go for SHR. According to Bob Pockers, we know 3 of the 4 potential teams that are going to buy the charters. First one is Front Row Motorsports. Front Row is expected to move into one of the SHR shops and buildings going into next year, and they're looking to be a 3-car team next season. Todd Gillen is expected to sign a multi-year contract extension with Front Row Motorsports in the coming weeks and days, and I do believe the 2 other drivers potentially could be Cole Custer and Josh Berry. Cole Custer's name has been mentioned as a potential candidate to take over the 34 car next season, and Cole will be working with his dad once again over at Front Row Motorsports. It makes a lot of sense. His name has been mentioned a bit, and he brings sponsor funding with Michael McDowell going to Spire next season. Cole Custer likely goes to the 34 car in 2025. I think Josh Berry goes to the 36, and I think a 38 is Todd Gillen. Now, I think Riley Herbst, who is also out of the ride at this point, he'll probably end up going there next season. Then you've got 2311 as a second option. 2311 Racing is looking to have a 3rd car going into next season. Tyler Reddick's under contract for multiple years. Bubba Wallace is also expected expected to sign a multi-year contract extension with 2311 Racing, which will be coming in the next few weeks. The third seed more than likely is going to go to Corey Heim. There's also a possibility that Chandler Smith and Eric Almirola could also be candidates for this seat, but more than likely Corey Heim is going to go to a third 2311 Racing car next season. He's a reserve driver for 2311 Racing. It only makes a sense right there. The other team is Trackhouse Racing. Trackhouse Racing is expected to have 3 cars next year. Ross Chastain's under a multi-year deal and is not going anywhere anytime soon. Daniel Suarez is very close signing an extension with Trackhouse Racing. And then, of course, you have to deal with SVG and Zane Smith. Zane Smith, more than likely, is going to get the nod for the third car, where I think Shane Van Gisbergen is probably going to go to Kaulig Racing next season. As for the rest of the drivers at SHR, many of them have released statements. Chase Briscoe released a video earlier today thanking SHR for the opportunity. Riley Herbst said in a post as well that he wanted to thank Rem for all support in bringing me from my dark times and coming in and giving me the chance and opportunity to drive for this team. Cole Custer was heartbroken today, but he'll have a ride going into next season. And all the people I've seen in Denny Hamlin even praise them for all the success. Now let's talk about the other 2 teams that could be in the running. Richard Childress Racing, they're looking to have a third seat next year. And apparently they're one of the teams that's in the running for another charter going into next year. Kyle Busch is under a multi-year deal, despite people trying to say he's going to go to 2311. Kyle Busch is under a multi-year deal with RCR. Austin Dillon just also signed a multi-year extension. Noah Gragson is more than likely going to RCR from what I've heard. The Bass Pro Shops connection that he has with a team. I know someone mentioned JJR the 19, but I don't think Toyota wants to work with Noah Gragson. So I think that he'll likely go to RCR in the number 33 car and not Austin Hill. The other one's RFK Racing, but Brad has kind of denied those rumors. I think RFK might be off the table to get a third charter going into next season. I think more than likely they may not expand, but if they do expand, it'll look at Haley Deegan and Matt Benedetto, Riley Herbst, even Cole Custer, even maybe Chase Briscoe as well as possibilities. Speaking of some of the drivers of SHR, I think Chase Briscoe is going to go to the Wood Brothers next year. Harrison Burton, I think, is going to be completely out of the Cup Series too. Chase Briscoe will probably go to the 21. Here's why. Briscoe is a Ford driver. Ford really likes Briscoe. Very talented driver. I think he would do really good at the Wood Brothers next season. Harrison Burton, while I think that he's got talent, he's been struggling immensely this season. And he's not been having a good year. And he said coming this season that this was a make or break year for him. He's basically a break year. He's done. I've heard for a while he's likely out of the team. Chase Briscoe goes to 21 and will become a playoff contender instantly. Ryan Blaney, Matt Benedetto, and Paul Menard were playoff contenders. I think it should be no brainer that Briscoe is going to go to the 21. As like I said for Noah Gragson, RCR is the most likely landing spot for him going to 2025. Front row is also an option, and Trackhouse has been mentioned, but I think he goes over to RCR next season. Josh Berry, like I said, front row. What about Ryan Preece? Ryan Preece, more than likely, in my opinion, is out of the Cup Series altogether, unless he goes part-time with Rick Ware. But I think if there's someone that's going to go full-time with Rick Ware, it is Riley Herbst if he doesn't go to front row. I think that Ryan Preece will be out of the Cup Series and back to modifieds or part-time in the Truck Series. I think we see that end up happening for Preece. As much as I think Ryan Preece is an extremely talented driver, I just don't think he'll be in Cup next year, unfortunately. I think his days of being a Cup Series driver are sadly going to come to a close and to an end. But going back to SHR, it is a really sad day for me and a lot of fans. SHR is a team I rooted for many, many years. I really am also feel horrible for all the people at the team. They didn't really know what the future was. It's not just the drivers or the crew chiefs or the spotters. There's hundreds of people that work at SHR that are now looking for jobs. I really am wishing everybody the best luck at SHR going forward, and I hope everyone can find jobs. I think everyone will be able to. There's a lot of great people over at SHR. It is really sad to see the Stewart-Haas Racing is going away. It's really was sad when Ganassi announced they were going to be leaving at the end of that 21, and now another really great team, though they fumbled the last couple years. It is so sad to see that SHR is going to be going away at the end of the year. Again, I'm wishing everybody the best of luck at SHR. Can find jobs going to next year. It is a really sad day, and it sucks to see the Stewart-Haas Racing will not be around once again in 2025. Unfortunately, their Xfinity program is going to be gone. I expect AIM Racing to pick up the remains going into next year, maybe a two-car team. RFK could go back to Xfinity, but it's unclear at this point. They could get Frankie Muniz perhaps in the future, and we'll see what happens at SHR. But sadly, I think SHR is now officially gone, unfortunately. So that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, to notify when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Let us go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. What is your favorite memory of Stewart-Haas racing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And you think Junior Motorsports will ever jump the Cup or not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. There will be a Truck Series race pick video at some point later today, probably before I head to work. And then on Thursday, we're going to have probably race picks for Xfinity and Cup. And then on Friday, we'll have a NASCAR news video probably early or in the middle of the afternoon. And then, of course, Saturday and Sunday, we'll have reactions to Gateway and Portland International Raceway. Got a lot of great content dropping that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.